poem is over 50 pages, so I'm not going to belabor the activity here. As Akashic Sangoma, I peer into the Congo. As transpersonal witness, as incisively faceted tiger, squirming, having the powers of a shark, via forces that sculpt the lenticular as lightning. Perhaps a telepathic wakefulness, perhaps magisterial conjuration, creating migrational litmus in my blood, thereby knowing the dangerous template that is the Congo. Blood-infected, dazed conundrum, horrific with grandeur, solemnly lit by grainy episodes of lightning. Thus, duplicitous tragedy innate with microcentric suffering, its stressful indictment, its tertiary woundings, its camps, its darkened glossolalia at the height of bloody moonrise. As far as auric markings, I am never plagued by microtessellation, by extended physical armament, as if under siege listening to dysfunctional scallops. This being none other than spectral conflict consulted by looming sentiment, by the spectral inflame that allows the mind to consume itself as refraction, as a smoldering mental sea. Knowing resonance via Akashic transference, I spontaneously engage levitational fuels. Therefore, I engage magnetism and magically invade latitudes and formation. By astonishment, by conundrum, by circuitous circulation according to the realm of osmosis, non-aligned to the institutional as drama. Via intuition, I leap to China and its pragmatic repression, its sociological deprecation. Therefore, I take issue with pragmatic epistles, mechanical as they are, with superimposed stasis conveyed as pointless equilibrium, always desirous of burning roads into swamps, placing taxable recognition on grain, or pulling wayward crops from earth. These are measures that suffocate the Congo with its intricate mysteriums so that we cultivate endemic demise, so that we cultivate infected tautology, that bruise us as ventriloquial diamonds, shattered in such a manner that we become studded with foreign domination that degrades according to wattage from Belgium, or entangled castles in Britain, or psychic swamps in the Vatican. And all of the above, sire, general psychic clotting, siring a nightmare of particulars, negatively alive with carnivorous anti-resonance, a resonance that reigns as compromised respiration, alive as the global Occident with its self-defination as fever, with its thought always active as befouled arrangement to percussive ostentation, as poison psychic fueled, as manufactured habitats, as emblematic dysfunction. I'll end it there for this first portion.
Awesome.
As I said, it goes on for many pages.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, it's such a song of the Congo, such a recuperation of the Congo. So I think my first question, honestly, is why the Congo and why now for this text? Like, honestly, I feel as though we get so much when we think about post-colonial gazes, and we get so much of West Africa, we get so much of East Africa, but going to the Congo, what led you there?
It's the heartbeat of the world.
Point well taken.
And it's never recognized as a central heartbeat.
Yes,
That's
yes.
an important point. I take all of the republics in the West, you know, the forces in the West, you know, it's descended on the Congo. Actually, as I point out in my introduction to the Refractive Africa, it goes back to the Portuguese.
Yes.
You know, and King John, a little prior to King John I, who was the father of Prince Henry the Navigator. And he was in Ceuta, in northern Africa. You know, the city's still there. I think it's in Morocco. And as this momentum started, Henry took it over and began sailing down the west coast of Africa, and hence we have this embroilment that is still going on to this moment. It's out of the news, and all we hear about is the Ukraine, unfortunately. Not that the Ukraine is a place to be eschewed, but it is not the only circumstance in the world.
When I was in Eritrea in 2018, that like China's footprint as well in the Congo.
But because it's China, it's seen as having some benefit. There's no benefit to this because, and as I was some time back, the people in Malawi, for instance, did not care so much for them coming in because they understood that point, that long historical point. So what I'm interested in is we're going to integrate the whole psychophysical global circumstance. We have to include, not exclude. So how many stories do we have on Congo? I mean, the Friends of the Congo, you can Google this information, but it's not easy to come by.
And I think that's why this song ends up being so important of, like, you know, a poetry witness to retell those stories. I remember, like, seeing that text, Leopold's Ghost, and, like, really hearing the kind of tragedies and, like, the atrocities. And this text also gets to that and bears witness to that, too. And so could you talk about how that kind of pieces together in your whole kind of cosmology of work? Because I feel like you've always been singing the songs of the marginalized, but always singing it with like a prophet's passion. For how do you find what songs need to be sung at what moment? How do you get there?
Strictly intuition, almost not. It's not. I'm not colonized by cognitive expertise.
Oh my goodness, that's a great turn of phrase. Yes, I feel you. Yes,
not cognitive expertise, but you know, I learned. There's Robert Frost who said one time, who, by the way, I'm not particularly enamored of, but
me neither.
But he had this one statement about the poet walks through a field of thorns with boots on, and he walks across this field and he picks up whatever is that the boots pick up on as he spontaneously, you know, ambulates to the field. So this is my natural method. You know, I don't pre-plan anything. In that sense, I don't owe Breton, but I'm naturally, like Césaire says, I'm naturally drawn to that, you know, because I have a non-linear mind just by nature.
I think for such a dense vocabulary, the musical ear is still on point. Like when you're reading, like there's just moments almost as though it feels like it's being channeled. And I think it's a lot because of that repetition, like perhaps, and like just that kind of building of that kind of rhetorical flex. How could you talk a little bit about that? Well,
having listened to so much music.
Yes.
And in particular, the perpetual avant-garde. They call it. I call it the perpetual avant-garde. You know, listen to Eric Dolphy's.
Yes.
However seemingly abstract this is, all these condensation points, because the cosmos itself has balance and reason to it, but not in a superficial manner. It's a continuous organicity, but because this continuous organicity has been disrupted by this colonization process. Energies that could be learned out of the cosmos don't have a filtering point on this earth. And this is one of the reasons why the condition that we're talking about here at this time is fragmented to such a degree that it leaves the leaders and all the politicians very confused, in the Occident in particular. These systems are like scripted across long periods of time that the individual mind can't, for the most part, can't put their hands around it because you're mesmerized by recent thinking.
Yes, I'm with it.
So the recent thinking is colonizes and opens up the mind to, it's an ironic statement, but it opens up the mind to restriction. the cognitive process of addition, quantity.
Yes, more and more.
That Rene Guénon, the person that may not be known by many people, but he understood this in this book called The Reign of Quantity and the Signs of the Times. The idea of quantity is overtaking all quality.
Yes, yes.
That is always populating the consciousness of the everyday mind on a planetary scale.
Oh, seriously.
It's one of the contributing factors to our climate deficit.
Yeah.
One of the contributing factors.
Yes, yeah.
But it's the individuals piling up, but at the same time, this consciousness piles up junk. And if we see the situation with the low orbit of the satellites,
Right.
these momentums, and I tell everybody that they should not lose their handwriting skills, because some of these things may not work out so well as we go into the deep future. Therefore, our bodies remain sans value via generic monetary climate, far beneath the micro scale of American nickels and quarters. Because I'm able to dart across invisible ravines, I am akin to stunned equations. I remain the inclement Sangoma who foretells the state of birth and rebirth via galaxy after galaxy, as if I were a living turquoise formulation. Say I morphed into an isolate peccary or a fermented lion sans living context. I could not dimensionally espy European projection is perfect with evil. I always revivify its abstracted menace, its negligible claim to reason, all the while possessing corrosive heavenly yield that arises from a blank foundation that founders via its own belief, via its understated fatigue, propelled by bygone direction, vis-a-vis the waste of the cosmos, via innavigable bells, never singed by living electrical law, but concurs with itself via transparence. As would a dazed electrical griffin, I vertiginously explore invisible solar forts on Mimas and Saturn, or psycho-echo missions across galactic volcanic vicinity. So as freedman, as Akashic grammatical instant, I'm able to freely rove through and beyond glass as perpetual holding pattern, accompanied by interior spirit of vitreous owls, through perhaps sigil as a sudden predatory vapor, as proto-segment, as contradictory ash magically fallen from heaven. So from this height, I see the Congo as proto-condensation prior to incarcerated mass, being pre-celestial in nature, as sporulation from the cosmos, as if we were a pre-inhabited galaxy, conversant as a remnant of Mars, in Sangyo, in Adamwa Ubange, in Gur, yet we remain compelled to ruminate on dire consequence as fate, that the oxygen dent has inspired in us, dominant with its blinding, providing facility for our profound self-abnegation as principle.
Just like, you know, the jazz musicians and used to find just these like little vocal phrasings and just these little like bites of sound. I feel like this little just like dense little units of language that you're able to work with. And I'm really interested in how you're able to, you know, English is like this inherited tongue, of course, of colonization, of slavery, and how you're able to use that tongue, yet speak outside of that tongue and critique it.
English has been this is the dominant, so-called dominant language on the earth. And anywhere you go in the world, you can find somebody that'll, you know, speak with you. So it's not something that, as I point out at the beginning of the book, I'm using it to transfer power.
Well said.
In terms of the way it operates in the world. And I'm not doing this as a scholar, as a certain expertise, but the way that you have, there's a space where you can begin to, how can I say, positively infect.
Ooh, yeah.
Positively infect other forms of consciousness. And see, enough people speak English, so you can affect them on a global scale.
Yes.
You don't have to just limit yourself to the neighborhood, say the neighborhood I was raised in,
Right.
or anybody was raised in. In other words, you can leap out of these little spaces, these pre-stamped spaces that that they psychologically colonize you in.
One of the things that this text does a lot too is to put like kind of two opposing forces next to each other and just sit there with that juxtaposition and just let go. And it feels as though almost like the paradox of the contradiction like ends up meaning more than just like saying something straight of like a straight indictment like that capitalism doesn't work or colonialism's bad. Like
reality is complex, by the way. It's very complex. And I got this originally when I was very, very young from a great little-known giant, the great Booker Little, the great trumpeter, who talked about dissonance expanding sound, not reducing sound.
Oh, I can dig that. Dissonance expanding sound.
Dissonance expanding sound. So, in other words, this contradiction resolves. Someone was asking Eric Dolphy once about, music is, but he says, I'm expanding and I'm learning, I'm getting into this other activity of consciousness. And the people at the moment didn't understand properly what he was doing. Never did. And this is a big problem for the consciousness of the whole planet, because how many people know about these innovative thoughts?
Not enough.
Not enough. And so it's minority issue, it's this, it's a minority consciousness. I was oppressed by this, and you just stay at that point. What about liberating yourself from that oppression, psychologically?
Right. So how do you hold all of it? I mean, honestly, within like one turn of phrase, we can end up like from something as small as being on the tip of a finger to something as big as being on the edge of the horizon of, a star breaking back to like the tongue of, the colonial speech in Belgium to the native tongue in Africa, back to the griot. We can be all of that literally within like one stanza. How do you hold all that?
This is my natural, I don't get fatigued by it, but
that's amazing.
It opens me. It doesn't restrict me, but that's just the way that my wiring works. But if you look at the way that the mind can work, we can go further and further and further, advance and advance and advance in terms of the way we weaken the colonial psychological spell, the colonial spell.
Can you talk a little with the process? I want to be able to tap into. Is it just through the writing and intending to this kind of spiritual practice of writing and seeing? Is it through hard looking? How can I find more room for things like that you have? Again, like there's so much. It feels like that you can't be full.
You don't want to retain things.
Wow. Okay, I can dig it.
People want to retain and memorize the old. I think Goethe said that the West, and I'm just paraphrasing.
Oh, no, and I'm just trying to soak it all in.
Talked about the whole idea of not being able to advance beyond repetition, of repeating yourself to get to the point where you can illuminate yourself.
Let's go.
You're not eschewing history, but you're understanding there's something beyond regression of consciousness.
So going forward instead.
Yeah, going forward. And so one of my next works I'm working on now is called Anterior Wattage.
Anterior Wattage.
But it hasn't appeared yet, although I'm working on that scale of, these general questions are asked by cosmologists. What happened before the Big Bang?
Right.
So I began to psychologically try to articulate this invisibility, this translucence, and via some time ago. And I've been working on that for, like on a protracted level, protracted scale. And so, but right now, in terms of the next books, I don't want to say this term, but it's almost an embarrassment of riches.
I love that. I love that.
But
yeah.
I don't want to overblow the situation, as they say in music, but to early 2021, books started to come out like The Combustion Cycle.
Yes, yeah.
And the Colloquy at the Abyss. And these two.
You seem especially fecund right now, like especially. Like.
Yeah, I just that's how I've always worked. But you know, this has been particular. You know, the pandemic actually helped me. But I'm not saying that's good, because it wasn't good for so many people.
But you have been able to kind of find a space of creation.
I found a space of creation, and there's this brand new book volume here, The Contortionist Whispers.
Oh wow, what a title! Good.
That just came out from Action Books.
You know, you do these long poems, but they always land with such a punch. Like, again, like how you know when to get out always intrigues me.
Nature does this. When it's time to stop raining or it's time to stop snowing. The Congo is like watching a mangrove lake dissolve through execution, hatching at all moments infected leptons and quarks, alive with psychic weaponry as fatigue. I'm thinking of our national voodoo wrestling, with each combatant like a charged spider or a form of leopard on fire, where the victor consumes entrails, where wrestlers cough up blood on command, where a straight razor vanishes into the depth of some opponent's throat. Women, the ilk of Miss Martha or Shakira, consume certain men in combat, where the viewer is always jolted back and forth across the sacred and the profane, between life and death, between real and unreal. This being part of our blizzard of misery called Kachfeche, and its symbol of our Kivu conflict ignited in 2004 between the DRC and Hutu power from Rwanda. The former being the FARDC and the latter being the FDLR. Its three phases between 2004 and 2009, between 2012 and 2013, between 2015 and the present. A compound complexity involving Angola, Zimbabwe, Botswana, involving leaders such as Babacar Gaye, Robert Mugabe, Ian Akama, Laurent Nkunda, igniting internal displacement, further compounded by mortality displacement, including the darkened groan of children dazed by ruination as belligerents forced to murder, known in Swahili as Kodogos, under commanders such as Thomas Lubanga Diallo and the late Laurent Kabila. The power of the 2012 Mongova rape assaults, symbolic of the Congo with its bloody ossification, under the auspices of skeletal deliberation, with its armed and jealous judgments, bribery being our principal circumstance, primed via the authorized cosmology of death. Should I speak in Lingala or French or a formally interpreted English, the result being horror, the mind-blind eye of violence with its tempestuous gauge, side by ferocity of silence. So as Sangoma, I listen in my sleep for ignited phonemes, for scratches of sound that issue from germinal graveyards, orally citing those who poach corpses for profit. So I, who have mastered certain phonemes from English and inquire from modern angst, its sullen contribution, so that its seizure relents concerning our mineral largesse, so that beings such as Dr. Mukwege and Chikia Utamsi continue revealing our neo-humanity that forges beyond forbidden realms that supersede the aristocracy of diamonds. The whole idea of the complication
Yes, yes.
of all these different forces coming together. It's beyond the capability of what one is seemingly born with. You know, even if you don't know something, you exercise at that level to such a degree that these things become apparent, not in a rational way, but in a kind of the way that things percolate. Because most of the things that we know, all the things that we know, were pre-human on this earth.
Yeah, being pre-memory.
Like a shamanistic understanding, we increase our grammar, not in terms of rationality, but in terms of just the knowingness and the balance of the understanding.
Well, thank you for helping me increase my grammar, and thank you for helping all of us through your work increase our grammar. Thank you so much, seriously.
Thank you for having me.